Hello everyone. Given last week's topic and the heat of resistance on both sides of the argument, I thought it only natural to segue into this topic, and to use myself as an example to do just that. No one stands in a place of pure positive focus 100% of the time. We all have subjects which we have more or less resistance to. In other words, we all have those subjects which make it difficult for us to focus positively. We all have more resistance relative to certain subjects than others in our lives, and it's different for every one of us. Some of us have more resistance relative to the subject of war. Some of us have more resistance relative to the subject of politics. Some of us have more resistance relative to the subject of relationships, etc., etc. It just so happens that given my experiences, education, and perspective, I have more resistance relative to the subject of vaccines than most other subjects. Last week I was asked my full opinion regarding the subject of vaccines. And many of you who watched that video detected the fact that the tone of the video was much different than the tone that I usually present to people in these video teachings. The reason for that is I was presenting thoughts which were resistant in nature. Many of the thoughts I was presenting to you, regardless of their validity or not, were pushing against the problem instead of oriented in the direction of the solution, which is why when many of you watched that video, it did not feel as good for you emotionally to watch as other videos which I have done. However true those thoughts may have been, and however strongly I stand by my opinion relative to vaccines, during last week's video I was focused on many thoughts that caused me to feel bad instead of good. I focused on thoughts that caused me to focus on the problem and not the solution. The problem being what is wrong with and the negative aspects of vaccines. The solution being the positive things that the negative problems with vaccines have inspired me to personally desire. I enjoy using myself as an example because it's never my desire to present to you the idea that I stand in the space of pure positive perfection relative to every subject. That doesn't help you at all. And if I'm able to use myself as an example, you will have a more accurate way of understanding what it is that I'm trying to convey. Many people feel this kind of resistance that I hold relative to the subject of vaccines relative to the idea of war. There are a great many people who are excited at the idea of war. Many people who think it is the solution to many things. If this was not the case, there would be no war. But there are also a great many people who recognize all the negative aspects about war. We understand that war is a departure from who we really are. We understand the suffering it causes, and so we would never condone war. But there is a big difference between going in the direction of peace and resisting war. Focusing on and pushing against a problem does nothing good for anyone. Focusing on and going in the direction of a solution is the only thing which actually benefits anyone. This is why during an anti-war rally you will see the very same vibration and anger arising from the activists that you do from the people who are actually fighting the war. There is a big difference between pushing against what you don't want and going in the direction of what you do want. Resistance is easily understood with the analogy of the river. When you are flowing downstream with the current of the river, there is no resistance. However, when you are faced upstream against the current of the river, that is resistance. This is a vibrational universe. Everything is a vibration of energy, and when you introduce a lower and slower vibration to a higher, faster one, the result is a slowing of the faster vibration. The non-physical, eternal you holds a very high vibration. When you hold a thought or focus on something which holds a lower vibration, you are literally resisting the energy from that true self from flowing into your physical existence. You are in resistance to the energy which your soul is trying to push through you into a unit of well-being, into an existence of well-being which you could experience in your life. In other words, you prevent the flow of the energy from your non-physical eternal self to your physical temporary self in the same way that you turn upstream against the river and resist the river. The non-physical eternal you, which is often called your soul, is in a state of total non-resistance. Its perspective is one of total non-resistance. The focus it holds is purely positive. So when you give your attention to something that causes you to feel negative, no matter how true it may be, That is your indication that you are giving your attention to something that is putting you in a state of resistance. When you give your attention to something that causes you to feel positive, you are in the vibrational harmony with your non-physical eternal self, and there is no resistance present within you. You cannot lie to yourself and tell yourself to fall in love with something that you don't love. You can't trick yourself into liking something you don't actually like. But you can always find something to put your focus upon, whether it's a thought or a thing, that causes you to come into alignment with who you really are. You can always find something to focus on, which puts you in a state of non-resistance, and thus allows the well-being and the solutions to flow to you. You can do this regardless of any circumstance that you find yourself in, regardless of how extreme it is. Some examples of resistant thoughts are as follows. One day we're all going to die because there isn't enough resources on this planet for all of us. I want love, but I don't think I can have it. I want that, but I don't have it yet. The government is against us. The polar bears are starving. I am a failure. I am a victim. There's nothing I can do about it. Your emotion will always tell you whether you are in a state of resistance or allowing, because your emotion is the physical reflection of the vibration that you hold. So focus in a way that makes you feel positive relative to every single subject in your life, and you will create the very things which you are wanting to see. Many people think that being happy is about shutting the world out. When they hear those of us talk about mind creates reality, they say, oh, you're just going into a state of denial. You're basically plugging your ears and covering your eyes to the reality that is, and so you are ignorant. Happiness is not about going into a state of denial. It is about deliberately choosing what you focus on, regardless of the circumstances that you're in. So you don't need to limit your life experience. In fact, you couldn't, even if you wanted to, take action to try to wall yourself off from the experiences, both positive and negative, that you're going to be experiencing in the physical dimension. Deliberate creation is about, while you're in the midst of those negative things, how do you focus on some aspect which causes you to come into alignment with who you really are? How do you focus in such a way that you are aligned with the solution instead of the problem? How do you focus in such a way that you are feeling positive emotion, because that positive emotion is your indication that in that moment you are holding a thought which is not resisting. It is in a state of allowing and creating what you do want. You cannot say that you condone war. But what you can do is focus on those aspects relative to the subject of war, or what war has inspired you to want, that feel good for you to focus on. You could focus on what peace looks like to you, what it would feel like. You could look at what solutions you could do in your daily life that would line you up with what peace is. You could focus on the fact that without war, we would have no idea what peace actually is, because it's that understanding which is born from the contrast. So when you're experiencing war, that is the necessary conditions which is even giving rise within you what peace is, the understanding of peace. You could focus on how many people on this earth are also going in the direction of peace. This kind of focus is a non-resistant focus. Not only that, it helps you to line up with the actual solution so you can create it. It is very different than focusing on those aspects of war that you can't stand. Focusing on them in such a way that it causes you to feel extreme negative emotion relative to the subject of war, which does no good for you or the world you live in. In fact, it perpetuates the very thing which you are pushing against. Sometimes when I am presenting my own opinion to you, I will present the things which inspired me to that opinion, which is not always sunshine, gumdrops, and roses. But I must tell you, in this universe, focus on the problem holds you in a space where you can't be a match to the solution, because when you're focused on the problem, you are a vibrational match to the problem. When you're focused on the solution, you are a vibrational match to the solution. So you can't focus on the problem and be a match to the solution at the very same time. You are not a vibrational match to it. When you are praising something, when you're appreciating something, when you're acknowledging the value of something, when you're looking for positive aspects about something, when you're smiling, when you're laughing, when you're applauding something, When you're feeling that feeling of joy and health and well-being pulsing through your being, there is no resistance within you. You are, in those moments, vibrationally in alignment with who you really are. When you are feeling anger or frustration or fear or loneliness or guilt, or those feelings that you call negative emotion, that always means that you are looking right at something that you do not want. You are pushing against those unwanted things instead of going in the direction of what you would prefer. Anytime you are in a state of resistance, you are preventing the very thing which you want. Which is why when we talk about deliberately creating your reality, it is so important to understand the concept of resistance. Resistance is basically those thoughts which you're thinking which do not match the vibration of what it is that you are wanting. That's why they feel negative to you. They don't match who you really are. That's also why when many of you watched that video last week, it did not feel as good for you to watch as most of the videos which I create. So the question that you have to ask yourself is this thought I'm currently thinking, these things that I am speaking, or these actions that I'm taking, in an aspect of resistance, or in an aspect of allowing and then going in the direction of what I would prefer? Focus on the solution. Focus on those things which cause me to feel positive emotion relative to whatever it is that I am experiencing. Have a good week.